If you'd like to show that you know something about esports, that you're not a complete fuckwit when it comes to Counter-Strike and undeserving of a place in or around the game because you don't understand any of the basic fundamentals of what makes a good team, or even the accoutrements of the scene and the history and how to put together a team and what the value of certain people are, then perhaps you could show it by going on Alpha Draft, play fantasy esports such as CSGO. You make a team, you pick the right players, you figure out where it makes sense to spend the money that you get overall, the $50,000 salary cap within each tournament, to get a quality performance and then potentially win money, unlike what the TSM CSGO squad will be doing. Now, you'll be disgusted to see Reggie's side in CSGO as if I was talking about the murder of a beloved monarch. Alpha Draft, bullshit walks, squeal talks. Now then, TSM, Team Solo Mid, has announced their new lineup for CSGO. And before we discuss all of that, like, the lineup itself is Semphis, FNS, Automatic, Vice, Sick, and then Valens as their coach. Now, before we can discuss the new lineup, though, what I think of it, what I think the potential is, we need to contrast it against their old lineup that just left and became ex-TSM, then Team Question Mark, and now has just become Astralis, their own organization. So they got that team, their first ever team in CSGO, TSM, on the 29th of January of 2015, which was right after the team that at the time had been the Dignitas lineup had just finished third place at MLG Aspen, which at the time was their best ever finish at a big international LAN. They had lost there to LDLC, the eventual champions, in the semi-final, but in the third place decider, they'd managed to beat Fnatic, the legendary team that obviously has gone on to become the best lineup in history. Admittedly, Fnatic did let Nuke come through, which is a map that Fnatic didn't play, so maybe Fnatic was fucking around a little bit, or just wanted to test that map out and see what it was like. So, okay, but even so, to beat Fnatic, big time stuff. Now, including because I think they did it on Mirage as well. Now, over their tenure with TSM, that lineup was able to play in 19 LAN events, assuming we include the Fragbite Champions Showdown, which was between the Season 3 and Season 4 champions, TSM and Fnatic. Now, of those 19 LAN appearances, they won 5 titles. And the great thing about the titles they won is a number of them were big-time titles. Like, you think about the CCS, PGL CCS kickoff season. That was some of the best teams in the world, including the 2 best teams in the world, Envious and Fnatic at the time, and they won that tournament. Then you think of Face It Stage 2, where they were able to beat out Na'Vi, beat out Cloud9. This was a team with a lot of the elite teams in attendance. Then you think late in the year, PGL Season 1, they beat Virtus Pro twice, they beat Fnatic. These were big-time titles to win. They won 5 titles over the year, which was a very impressive number for that lineup. I think the only lineup that won more titles overall, as in a specific 5-man lineup, was Fnatic. Okay, Envious had like 4 titles with one lineup, then 4 titles with another. They made 10 finals out of the 19 events they played at. They had 15 top 4s. So think about that, 15 top 4s out of 19 LANs played. This was a consistently elite world-class team who most of the time actually made it to the final of tournaments, and on top of that, were able to win a solid number, almost a fourth of the tournaments they entered. They were top 8 at all 3 majors, though admittedly the majors were where they had a little bit of a dip in form because twice they finished in the quarterfinals. One time particularly they were expected both times they were actually expected to go further. The first time Katowice against NIP, they were favoured in terms of the map draw to some degree, but NIP managed to prevail in an amazing comeback on Nuke, the third map. And then the other round of 8 was against NIP, when NIP was heavily expected to lose, but actually managed to shockingly beat them on 2 of TSM's best maps. The other one was ESL Cologne, and they made it to the semi-finals there and lost in 3 maps to Envious, the eventual champions, and did perform well. They were, as a lineup, they were ranked 6th of all time by me in my top 20 CSGO lineups of all time, 6th best team to ever play, and they obviously have still kept that lineup together, and it still continues to this day. So one of the best lineups we've ever seen in CSGO. That's who TSM had as their CSGO team. Now, here's the biggest question you have to ask when we start off talking about this topic. Where is that team? Why aren't they still a member of TSM? Because you look at Fnatic. Fnatic had this incredible team. They still retain their 4 of the 5 players. Then you look at Virtus Pro, this incredible team that accomplished so much, so many top 4, so many big wins. major champions, they still have all 5 players. You look at NIP, a team that wasn't even able to pay their team at times, that there was all this strife behind the scenes. I had NIP players tell me, I think I'll leave at the end of the year, I'll go join this team, that team. They've retained 4 of their players going into the next year. They've got all that brand building still remains there, still some good players, and they're going to next year. You look at the Envious team, they've accomplished so much over the year. They obviously, if they'd wanted to leave, would have been hotly contested. They've kept all their players as well. Na'Vi haven't lost any of their players over all this stretch of excellent performance. TSM lost the entire team, lost everything about the team, didn't replace them with anyone. It wasn't even their choice to lose them. The team literally left and were like, we're off out of here. So how did that all happen? Well, here's some information, not all of which is public, but I'll go ahead and explain the things that I've come to through my own research and through a mixture of reading through the lines sometimes. So here we go. This team wanted to re-sign with TSM around the summer or just after the summer. Now, the reason why that's not a peculiar storyline, because, okay, yes, their contract hadn't ended, they signed in January, is because throughout CSGO in 2015, the game and the money around it and the interest in terms of the market value and the inflation from other orgs wanting to get into the scene has meant that salaries and the amounts you're paid and the prize money cuts and the cuts of the sticker money for the players has gone up and up and up and up and up over the year, so that as a result, all the teams who got signed last by their orgs, so that's why a team like Kingwin, when it first got signed, had some of the highest salaries in the world, higher than Fnatic, who was winning all the tournaments. Yet that Kingwin first lineup couldn't even make it to the semis of a big tournament. The reason why is because they signed later, so there was less teams available for an organization like Kingwin, and they were willing to pay more to get the top talent. So what happened was all the other teams who'd signed their contracts already, Virtus Pro, Fnatic, now TSM, these teams all were put in a situation where there were lineups that were better, that they were better than, who were making more money than them, or one of their rivals would be making more money than them. And when they'd hear this, they'd all go back to their orgs and they'd say, right, we want to stay, but we understand we're not getting what our market value is. And, obviously we could just ride out our contract and then wait 6 months or wait 3 months and then just leave and get a better deal anyway. But, we've built something here as an org and as players. Let's work together. Let's re-sign contracts. And so what the other teams did and the other orgs did that was intelligent is throughout the year, they either re-signed new contracts, extending them, or they signed them to new contracts that were the same contract as before, but altered to give them more base salary, or to give them a better cut of the stickers, or to give them signing bonuses, or to give them bonuses for winning tournaments. And this was a way that the other orgs all retained all their talent and were able to continually stop their talent getting bought out by people who had more money than them sometimes, or people who were coming in and could say, right, I could offer a lot more than this contract says now, just ride out your contract, come and play with me. That's why all these other orgs have kept their teams and haven't had this feeding frenzy over their teams. So what happened to TSM? Because the thing is, the players in TSM wanted to re-sign with TSM actually. What happened was, this team had been the highest paid CSGO team in the world when they were signed at the end of January. Now, just as a little aside, I know some of you are going to remember a story that the NIP owner, CEO at the time, came out and said, that's not true, our players are the highest paid in the world. That was complete shit, and the reason he said that is because he can just say that. No one was revealing the number, so he could just come out and lie and just say, no, actually my players are the best. And so everyone was like, oh, okay, I guess they are then. And then people kept perpetuating the story that NIP had all this money. It wasn't true at all. Anyway, TSM were the highest paid CSGO team in the world when they first signed. Problem is, by the summer, they weren't, and by towards the end of the year, when their contracts were running out, they were barely even in the top 10. Many, many teams were above them, including teams much worse than them. So understandably, these players wanted to do what the other teams did, get their market value. But the problem is, when they wanted to re-sign, summer and onwards, they had a situation where their manager of them as a team within TSM was the guy who's their manager now at Astralis. And this guy was fired. And part of the reason it was told was fired in public, and it was alluded to, was that first of all, he supposedly didn't tweet enough and run the social media account enough. And then it wasn't explicitly said, but behind the scenes, this is the excuse that was given and that was perpetuated, was the notion that he'd been talking to other teams because he knew that the team didn't have their proper value and finding out what the team was worth. And then he was going to come back to Reginald and say, the owner of TSM, and say, our team's worth more and these people will offer more, so let's re-sign the team. And Reginald, for whatever reasons, just thought, this is a disgrace. This person been talking to other people. He works for me. And then fired the guy. Except the problem is the players wanted that guy to be their manager. So once he was fired, Reginald had to put up a situation where the players then hired that guy on as their agent, which doesn't have to have anything to do with the TSM the team. So he was still involved with their team, but now he was 100% free to go to every org in the world and start talking to them months in advance of the contract's ending on how do you want to sign our team? Here's the things we'd bring. What kind of offer do you have for us? And so whereas in the past he might have talked to those other people but brought the information to Reginald, given Reginald the competitive advantage to potentially be able to re-sign his own team, now that guy has but he's not in any way beholden to Reginald at all. He has no obligation. So there's Reginald's first mistake, not signing the team, then firing the manager, then fucking up so that the manager's not even communicating with him on a total level because they've all now realised as a team, these people don't give a fuck about us. We're not going to re-sign with this org that's fucking us off like this and doesn't want to pay us right now to save money now when we're going to get the money anyway in a few months. So they're essentially just saying like, fuck you, we're just going to ride out the contracts. That's what the org's saying to you at that point in time. So the owner goes away and does that. So TSM's already done a huge fuck up by not re-signing them. Not least because you have to realise, at that point, they could have re-signed them for significantly less money than the team has now gotten with their salaries at this new organisation. Or they would have gotten even 5 months later with a different organisation. They could have gotten them cut price for a bunch more months. And then they could have added some more and kept it competitive and kept the players happy, but without ever having to go to some crazy level. All the while retaining a top 5 team in the world and a team that for the majority of the year was top 2 in the world actually and was even a potential champion. So here's the big problem. By not re-signing that team, TSM has fucked their future in CSGO because forget who they signed now. Let's pretend we don't know who their new lineup was and consider what will happen in the future to TSM. So bearing in mind they're not going to sign the Fnatic lineup. They're not going to sign the Envious lineup. They're not going to sign Virtus Pro. It's very unlikely they're going to sign Na'Vi. They couldn't get Luminosity. They're not ever going to have a team as good as that Danish TSM lineup ever again, at least for, let's say, this next year, 2 years from now, probably 3 years from now. Maybe at that point, if they really buck up their ideas and understand how important CSGO is, they could make a big play and they could get a huge team. But at the moment, the way the trend's going, and if they really do believe in this new lineup and want to invest in it, they will never have a team as good as that Danish lineup. A team that was top 2 in the world at times, that was a 5-time big event winner champion, that was a potential major champion, even though they never delivered on that part, that had 15 top 4s in a year. They will never have a team that even vaguely approaches the level of success and excellence and consistency as that lineup did. Their brand will never be able to accomplish in CSGO what the brand of the team that then left them has gone, where they've gone and formed this Astralis brand. That brand will accomplish more 3 or 4 years down the road in CSGO than this brand does from TSM. They've lost the sticker money that they would have gotten from how incredibly popular those players were and the signatures and all the rest of it. They've lost the branding power of having star players like Cajun B and Device and Dupree, having these big names and having the Danish scene as well as NA fans interacted there. There's all this bullshit that they said about how the manager hadn't been tweeting, etc. You notice that guy hasn't commented much on that because that's not the main reason he was fired, and that's not even a big comment in contention. It's also not even particularly the main job that he should have. Like anyone saying, oh, well, TSM as an org have been like focused on League of Legends, they didn't have much time and, no manpower to do tweeting. This is all nonsense, guys. It's very simple to get even an unpaid intern and say, oh, I want you to just keep up to date with like posting when the CSGO team has an online match. And if they win it, post this. Oh, there's a tournament coming up. Oh, just at least let us know, run it by us. Okay, yeah, can you make some tweets about that during tournament? This is not difficult stuff. It's not as though everyone who works at TSM has to have some degree in esports and has to have one set role. Like my only job is to do... I run all of the CSGO team and book their flights and look after the players and schedule games and I tweet as well. No, that's not the way esports organizations work. Anyone who thinks that is very naive or just a straight out idiot who's oblivious to what's actually going on in esports in the industry. It's not the way it is. And TSM's a massive org where they could very easily get people like that and they could very easily pay people. And there's lots of people out there. I've been in many organizations who are social media experts who you hire to do this, who you hire to do that, and you delegate the responsibility. It's not down to Reginald and his girlfriend and God knows whoever else to be doing these things. They delegate the responsibility. When they don't delegate the responsibility, then they say that they didn't have time to do it. They have failed, and it's their responsibility that they failed world in that respect, and they deserve no sympathy for that. It makes no sense at all, and it's quite a dirty way to try and sully the name of this manager, to fuck with him, be he was negligent of his duties and didn't tweet and all the rest of it, when that's not really what's going on there, and that's not what was going on behind the scenes. So anyway, in short, as the title says, TSM has had the worst off-season in history, but we'll get to more of that later. So, the new lineup of TSM, as I mentioned, is Semphis, FNS, Automatic, Vice, Sick, and then they have a coach, which is Valens. Now then, here's my thoughts on the lineup. So let's start with Semphis, the player with the most tenure as a top CSGO pro, never really top in an individual sense, but has played in teams that have been competitively relevant at an international level. He's made it to the top 4 of a major, he's made it to the top 8 of majors, he's had some good individual performances. He's played in a number of top NA teams, because you have to remember, before the Complexity Cloud9 core, he played in Quantic with Hiko Dazed, which was the original really good NA team before the Cole/Cloud9 lineup came along. Now, as a player at this point in time, remember, we're going to talk about all these players relative to the international scene and NA. Now, relative to the international scene, Semphis is just okay, if not slightly below average in terms of how his performance is going to be. He's an okay player. He can frag a bit. He's got some intelligence. He knows a lot about the game and how to break down players and study demos and these sorts of things. He does have intelligence there. That's how he can make up for the fragging in some sense. Problem is, he has downsides, which is part of the reason he's not in Cloud9 anymore, and why there was problems in Cloud9 towards the end, which is he can be quite stubborn, quite contentious, has his own set way of playing in terms of how he wants to play. Famously, if you have him with a player like a Shongez or some other sorts of people, other in-game leaders, it feels like, even though he won't be the in-game leader himself in most cases, by having him there, he'll sometimes short-circuit what they want to accomplish, and therefore they'll be at odds with what they're trying to do, basically. With that said, if I was making a lineup, okay, it's not that bad to have him in it, aside from the in-game leader issue, if he's one of the lesser players and the rest are all skilled, really talented, young up-and-comer. But at the moment, he's the best player in this lineup. That's the problem immediately. And there's also the issue, which is the issue in Cloud9, that his attitude towards other players, where he thinks some of them are online or bullshit, or he doesn't respect them and they have to prove it to him. Unfortunately, that in the past at least, I'm not sure how he is now since the Neelam era onwards, it seems like he's cooled down a little bit, definitely got in the way in the past of Cloud9 potentially recruiting players and potentially being able to have players who want to join their team and who wouldn't have gotten into insults and arguments with this guy. So that could be a minor factor in the future in trying to recruit players. With that said, I imagine getting paid as much as he is now, having an opportunity like this, having been humbled a little bit by leaving Cloud9, he's probably gotten over some of those aspects. So as a player, I guess he's okay. Now then, FNS, the second most famous player in this team. Obviously, previously of CLG, and then just before CLG, anyway, so they were in a lineup just before that, but it was basically them with JDM before, and then they got Peter in, and then they became CLG, and essentially were only really known from this year onwards because they qualified for MLG. Now, as a team, they were all right. At one point in time, they were contending for the best NA team, but obviously Cloud9 never took them in the summer, and then Team Liquid and Cloud9 right with them towards the end, and they managed to qualify for some majors, but they never made the playoffs there. They were just an all right team internationally. Never really had any monster upsets, like they never had any big series upsets. They did have the odd map upset. They obviously beat Fnatic on Mirage, ESL, ESEA Pro League Season 1 finals. And they obviously, with Peter, at the beginning of the year, MLG Aspen had managed to beat Envious, at the time LDLC, on Dust 2, which was their best map, 16-14, but largely due to Peter and 20 ult frags. So as a player, here's the thing about FNS. He's just a solid player. He's an okay role player to have in a team international level. Now, here's the positive thing about him is I think he's quite an intelligent player, actually. I think he is someone who understands some concepts about the game and how to play the game and even how to use some players, because in NA it's very much about how you use players, because some of them are going to be quite troublesome in terms of what they want to do, and so you have to build a team around them. I think he does have some intelligence in that sense. As a team player, just playing off people and communication seems to be decent in that respect. The problem is he's not a skilled player. Like before they made the switch where Cutler became the in-game leader and FNS stopped being the in-game leader and FNS became the lurker in the team, I thought he was a terrible player skill-wise. I thought he was well below par for international play, and he was really one of the holes in their team that when you had him and you had I I mean, I guess if you had Hayes as well, at the time they didn't have JDM, remember, and Peter was having his down periods as well. The team just did not have enough fragging power because Tarek wasn't performing up to par. Cutler was good, and then overall they didn't have a solid enough core. They didn't have enough firepower, and he was one of the reasons why they didn't. Because as a role player, he wasn't good either. Now, when they made the switch where Cutler became the in-game leader, FNS's fragging certainly went up, and he became a better player. Still, at best, an average player on an international level. Now, domestically in NA, okay, he's going to be okay. Especially because a lot of these players aren't very intelligent. So he's going to be able to counter their skill using his intelligence and understanding how to play the map. Likewise for Semphis, his long experience and his ability to play scrimmy and his ability to play against all types of players means he can counter it. But that's just in an NA level. When talking nationally, these players will be irrelevant. Now let's go down the list. Automatic. The thing about Automatic was he was never total shit and he was never good. At no point in time was he ever good. And he's definitely not on any kind of international level good. He was just okay even for NA. Slightly above average maybe for NA. He was in the Neelam team that beat Cloud9 into last place at ESEA Season 18. But a lot more of that had to do with how terrible Cloud9 was at the time rather than Neelam being some amazing squad. Sad thing is, when you look Semphis, FNS, Automatic at this point is either the second best or the best player in this team with Semphis. So you've got problems already. Then you look at the other two players they have, Vice and Sick. Now, both of these players were in a more recent Denial lineup. Here's the problem. So for Vice, I'd literally never heard of him because I don't watch online NACS in the lower levels. And he's someone who, as far as I can tell, that's pretty much it. That's his whole career, just playing online games, like playing in Premiere and whatnot. So no clue why even someone would pick him up. Never even heard of him being on the radar of any good teams at any point in time. Never even heard anyone hyping him in any way. Never even heard anything about this guy, and he's into this team already. So he was in Denial, he was in Maximum Effort. Then you go over to Sick, another player from Denial, formerly Immortality before that. He has played, as far as I can tell, 0 lands in his career. Or 0 lands that are in any stats database I could find. So again, a player where all they've done is play online. But even online, they didn't have any hype on them. Didn't have any... Like, talk all the shit you want about Stewie2K or about Kooster or whoever else seems like the hot new talent where we're still waiting for them to prove themselves. These guys have infinitely more hype on them from the pro players, from the fans, and from their actual accomplishments than this sort of people do. Vice and Sick have done nothing whatsoever to warrant being in a top team or to get a top salary or to even be being spoken about by me in a fucking video like this. Also, there's the fact that the Sick guy, when I went back and did a little bit of research, he played recently on the online section of Star Series and got his head fucking bashed in by Gamers Academy, the second best Brazilian team, who are hardly some international relevant team themselves. So not a great sign, is it? Now, finally, their coach, Valens, formerly in-game leader, in call with some of these players, Semphis, Automatic, etc. The problem is, as an in-game leader, he, much like FNS, he did seem like someone who had an understanding of the game, who had some intelligence. He seemed like someone who prepared strats. His problem was, and this is not going to be an issue here, obviously, because he's not playing, is that as a player, he wasn't just bad. He wasn't just irrelevant. He was insanely bad in terms of skill. I mean, this is a guy where if you just go and look at the stats for this guy and some of the tournaments he played in, online and offline, he has some of the worst stats you will ever see from any pro level player. I'm talking about tournaments with -100. I'm talking about tens, 20, 30, who knows how many dozens of single digit frag games. Literally, legitimately, this is one of the worst NA pros we've ever seen since GB James's prime. Now, okay, so here's the thing about this team. First of all, they are dog shit compared to the old TSM lineup. It's actually a disgrace, the drop-off in level in all respects between the old TSM, now Astralis, and this TSM. In fact, you could almost not get a bigger drop-off between a top team and a bad team that's making any kind of decent salary. They're almost like the limit ends of the spectrum of pro players that are out there. They're not even the best NA pros you could have gotten. I mean, I did this in Stewie 2K one, but I could list off like 30 NA pros before I get to these names who you could have gotten, bearing in mind TSM actually had to buy a couple of these players out of buyouts that were expensive, or if not gotten cores together or built teams around. There are so many names you could have gone with that they failed to get. This is also despite the fact that unlike a lot of teams who've even gotten better lineups and players than them, they had the jump on this whole offseason. TSM knew months beforehand that their Danish lineup might leave them and could already start looking around going, who's available? Who could we sign now? What are the buyouts going to be like? They didn't manage. This is why they failed in the off-season, because they've failed in every respect. They're let the best team go. They've got a dog shit team themselves. They haven't signed any good free agents. They've failed to secure anyone. Even people who were available said no to them because they couldn't make good offers to them. They failed in every respect you could fail in the off-season. They haven't even got the best team that's available to them. Titan is now available. They've already done the shit moves that meant they couldn't get them. They haven't gotten this Titan lineup, which would be much better than this team. They haven't gotten the G2 lineup, which has gone over to FaZe, a team that only started trying to get people towards the end and was trying to get the old TSM lineup. Alu didn't want to join, as in didn't want to join. Pimp didn't want to join. They tried to reach out to those players. They made such a shit offer, as in the money was good, and you get a spot in E-League or whatever, but the players they're going to play with are so terrible. These players are like, I'm not going to waste my time with that. I'm not even going to do that. It's no competition to play there. So if the players don't want to play for your org, you fucked up in some way. Simple goes over to Rivals Team Liquid and wasn't even asked till a week or two before he was going to be signed. So people like that were always available, never thought to take a chance on him, never reached out, never happened. This is not, I repeat, not an example of TSM looking at this NA scene and realizing that NA needs to get more talent and more good players and trying to reach out and really develop like some grassroots talent and get some players. That's the kind of bullshit they might sell you on. They might try and convince you that that's what's happening here. That's in reality not the case at all. I mean, they said in their own post, they said, our carefully crafted lineup, fuck you. No, it wasn't carefully crafted. You had no one available. That's like saying that a fucking dog, oh, I carefully crafted my meal tonight, master, with these scraps that fell on the floor off your table. No, that's all that was available, mate. What else is he going to eat? A dead rat in the fucking corner? Yeah, okay. Some dust, lint. They're not even food. So our carefully crafted lineup is based around 2 experienced players, correct? FNS Semphis, correct. With multiple majors under their belt. Now, true, they've played in majors. One of them a lot better in the majors than the other. Surrounded by 3 up-and-coming talents. Are we just going to say up-and-coming about every single player who hasn't been good yet? I mean, in what respect are these up-and-coming talents? Automatic is not an up-and-coming talent. Like, here's the thing. Let's start with Sick and Vice, the 2 unknown guys, right? What talent have they shown? What potential have they shown? In what trajectory have they shown to suggest they are up and coming? The only thing they're up and coming from, they were a bunch of trash that was in a trash heap, and TSM came along with a big crane and pulled down, and they just happened to be the pieces that came out. That's the only reason they're rising, mate, because your crane's pulling them out to a better team. Not through any kind of merit and building their way up and being hotly contested as free agents. Not in any way. So they're not up and coming players. Automatic, is he an up-and-coming player? I certainly wouldn't say so. Hasn't shown really any potential. He's shown he's an okay player, but we've actually seen him at a bunch of lands. We've seen him at a bunch of online competitions. We've seen what he's capable of. He doesn't show any signs that he's going to go to a higher level at this point in time. So you're only left with the veterans. Semphis, 100% known quantity. FNS, 100% known quantity. Just to stress this point about up-and-comers, bad players who weren't on top teams are not talent or up-and-comers. They are just bad players you have now put onto a top team. Do you understand this concept? If I get a rotten old apple out of a compost heap and I go and I put it onto my mantelpiece, I can't then go, oh, what I've got there is a kind of like an unpolished gem, and if I really work on that, I can make that like a beautiful... No, you can't. It's a rotten apple, mate. You've put it where you might put an unpolished gem and where you put something of pride on your mantelpiece that you want to eventually show off, but it will never be anything quality. You can't polish a turd, as the old saying goes. It's also not TSM's place to develop talent. TSM is one of the biggest and best esports orgs in all of the world. Now, admittedly, mainly for League of Legends, but they've also now got other games involved there as well. They are an org where, okay, yes, they might not have venture capital backing or the rich backing of billionaires in China like some of these League of Legends teams do, but beyond that, in the teams that have actually built up using proper business tactics and had a tenure of success and getting themselves up and up and up and building partner relationships, they are one of the best. Therefore, like all proper sports franchises, they should be buying quality talent. They should be buying quality players. If they have stars, they should be retaining stars and building around them. If you're a star player for a big franchise in a sport, you only leave when things have gone to shit, and you've repeatedly seen that org will not put a proper team around you that can win. Otherwise, star players stay put. It's the role players that come and go from teams and get built around that star because of the good relationship the star has with his org. TSM didn't have that with their org, with their players. And as a result, this top esports org has fucked up completely. Look at their peer group. So Envious and FaZe are two big North American orgs, both actually coming from over Call of Duty, whereas TSM comes from League of Legends. They both have two top-level teams. Envious have what was the best team in the world a month or two ago. FaZe have G2 now, which is one of the top 10 teams in the world. These have quality teams, even though they're North American. They went out and they got the talent. Then you look at the other peers they have in North America who have NA teams. So Cloud9 have the best NA team, or at least they did until recently. CLG have one of the better NA teams. Admittedly, their lineups changed. TL have potentially now the best NA team. They've just gotten this top talent in Simple. They've all got quality sides. TSM has fucking nothing. They have a dumpster bargain basement sale, but paid at top dollar with buyouts and paid a massive salary, and now they're saying they're developing the talent. If you get an ugly, say you have this mega hot girlfriend, right, a model, she's beautiful, she's intelligent, she has a degree, she speaks 4 languages, and then she says like, you know, could you really like come meet my parents? Like, I want to really like take this relationship to the next level. And you're like, listen, bitch, don't need that. Like, you know what? If you're not with me for the right reasons, don't give a fuck anymore. There's the door, get out. And then she leaves, and then you go to a bar, one of those old saloons with the door broken off and Skid Row, and the music's all blaring out, and there's all dangerous looking types around there, bikers, and you go in there and you find the most cracked out, wrecked fucking sket whore, promiscuous woman that you can find in this bar. She's got one tooth busted out. She's drinking moonshine. Right there, boy. If you take her home and then you say, I'm in a long-term relationship with this woman now, guys. I know she's got a lot of work to do, but I believe in her. I think that in time you'll see she has a lot of talent I can develop. No, that everyone would rightfully laugh you out of the fucking, I don't know, rec room that you're saying this dog shit in, or behind your back just go, what a fucking idiot. You know, you had a model before. What an idiot. He's having a meltdown. That's what we should be doing with TSM right now. This is appalling. So, what else is there? Okay, they also, in their statement, said that they're going to, let me see here. Our players, first of all, they said about the support staff. We believe that with a dedicated support staff, the players can be much more efficient at improving both their individual skill and executing new strategies. Well, that sounds incredibly fucking generic. Our players will move into a gaming house in the near future, which will allow us to test and push our boundaries. Okay, let's have a look then. So, they're getting a gaming house and they're going to get a staff. Now, the problem is, what staff? I have people all the time who ask me what staff they can get, what coaches they can get, who's available. And I have to tell them most of the time, there's almost no one available, no one I know of, you'd be taking a massive risk. So at the moment, I can go ahead and say, without seeing who they've got yet, they essentially have no meaningful staff. They have no staff that we know of that will be very good. We have no staff that can do the things they've stated there, develop the individual skill and execute new strategies in some special way that would make this team good and not a pile of trash and a false bill of goods for any TSM fan. They have none of that. Now, moving into a gaming house is also notoriously bad. It wrecked the old Titan lineup with shocks in it. A number of teams have tried it, so they don't like it. CSGO, it doesn't seem to work as well because you play these long seasons, you need time by yourself, you need time away from people. You don't want to get burned out like League of Legends pros do. The only teams that I know of with a gaming house is CLG, and they're hardly the best advertisement. At the start of FNS has left. Tarek was going to leave to Cloud9, but didn't. Cutler might have left. We have this scenario where they haven't accomplished much more than just qualifying for international lands, and that's about it. Luminosity apparently maybe have one when they're staying in NA, but it's different circumstances because they're staying outside their home country. There's nothing to show that having a game house is good. I mean, Fnatic don't need one. Envious actually have one now, and ironically went to shit not that long after they got all that scenario. So, again, not the best advertisement for that. So, let's think about what's happened after the off-season for TSM. So, their lineup has no stars, and it has no big names. Before, they had some of the biggest names, some of the biggest stars in CSGO. They have no good players. Before, they had one of the most skilled lineups in the world. They have no streamers of note. I don't know any of these players who have any kind of big stream following or marketable in that sense. Beforehand, They had some players who admittedly didn't stream much, but could have been definitely built into that quite easily. They have no core chemistry. Yes, a couple of the players played together in different teams, but not in any way that showed some special affinity or where they were going to play excellently. Essentially, the team has no future, aside from the fact that they're going to wear TSM jerseys and play in the E-League and play in whatever other tournaments. That's why my joke for this team is congrats to TSM for putting together a really solid lineup to be able to make deep runs at the NA CSGO minors.